What's up guys, welcome to Wasted Space, and we're back in Space Engineers with another episode of the Planet Survival Guide. And today we're pretty much picking up from the end of the previous episode. So we'd just been off mining, and what I've done is finished that mining off, filled up the rover down there, and then brought it back here, parked it somewhere sensible and emptied it again so you guys don't have to watch that side of things. So in here we have all the ore we recovered from that journey. I will admit I did end up throwing away some of the ice. For me, there's so much ice around, I don't really need to keep it. For you guys, you have to make a bit of a judgment call whether ice is kind of a rare material for you or not. But now we've got back, the first thing we're going to want to worry about is the fact that we have no motors, we have very few construction components, we're going to want to get building those straight away. So what we're going to do is hold down right click to drag the iron down into the refinery. And what the right click's going to do is give us this amount to add box so that we don't have to put it all in. We're just going to change the number to say 4,000 for the iron, and then do the same with the nickel, but make it maybe 2,000, because we don't need anything like as much nickel. Now at the moment you'll see this isn't doing anything. That's partly because it isn't turned on, and it's partly because we want to change a couple of other things before we turn it on. So if we go down here, we want to select the refinery, and for this bit, also our assembler, and we're just going to turn off this use conveyor system. Now what this does is mean that when we turn this refinery on, by default what it would do is go, okay, I need ore, I'll grab all the ore that's available and load myself up with it. The problem with that, of course, is we don't want it to put 44,000 iron in front of our nickel, because that's going to use loads of power and take ages to do the iron before we get any nickel out of it. So by turning that conveyor system off, it gives us complete control over what's being done at any given time. So the next thing we want to do is obviously turn our refinery on, and we'll notice that the required input goes up to 1 kilowatt, but we're still not doing anything. You know, it's not actually refining that ore because it doesn't have enough power. All of our batteries are set to recharge at the moment. So what we want to do, obviously get the batteries, turn off the recharge, turn off semi-auto, turn off discharge, and you'll see that they're now all in sort of pass-through mode, and more importantly, that refinery now has the power it needs to be working away. So while that does that, we're going to go and work on another bit of kind of the sustainability of this craft, because we have a couple of notable issues still with this particular vehicle and how we're surviving. So I'm just going to grab a few sort of selection of components so that I don't have to come back in here to build stuff. And we're going to go down outside, and basically what we're going to try and deal with is the fact that when we get out this block, you can see this is a temporary ship. It will get removed after you leave the game or spawn in a new one. Now in single player, this really doesn't matter, because in single player, like I'm playing here, you're not leaving the game, you're saving the game. So you reappear exactly where you were, your lander's exactly where it was. In multiplayer though, this would disappear when you left the server, which can be really difficult to deal with, especially when you look at it from the perspective that that means that, say you wanted to tear this whole thing down, rebuild it into another vehicle where you could use all these components but not lose it. That means that first game session on the server is going to have to be like 6 hours long to do all of the work. So this is a trick to kind of get around that problem and mean that we can keep this lander. So what we're going to do is just put a merge block down here on this sort of landing ramp. And then we're going to sit in front of it just like this and get a new station out. And initially it's going to sort of clamp onto that block, which is great because what it does is mean that it's all rotated round the right way. And we're going to line ourselves up a bit like this, and we're starting to move backwards. And what we're trying to achieve is, there we go, we've separated it from the block, and we want to try and keep it lined up as best we can. And then place this in such a way that there is about a 1 block gap in between this and that merge block we've built. So that looks about right. Hopefully I've got this good in one shot. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And we're going to come around and we're going to build a merge block on this as well, right way around. And you can see those two things they're pretty close to being lined up. So next job is to build these up, but this is where we're going to run into the problem. As you can see, these need motors. So we've got all the parts for everything in these but the motors. And looks like we're probably going to be short on construction components as well. So this is a great time, now we've sort of half done those, to jump back in and get our production going. So if we come back up here, we can see our iron's done, we're working on the nickel now. So first step is obviously to move some of this into the assembler, so we've got the bits we need to start producing. And then if we go over to production, we can see we can make the things we're lacking at the moment, which is the motors, the construction components, and soon large steel tubes as well. But for now, we're just going to stick a couple of motors in, so holding control to get 10 at a time. I'm going to put 20 motors in and say 100 construction components, because we use loads of those. And again, this isn't doing anything because we need to go in here, we need to turn it on, and you notice that this is still only going to the required input of 1 kilowatt, still not running properly. So what we need to do is go and find our battery with the most stored power, which in this case is battery 4. You can see it's got quite a lot. I'm going to turn this on to discharge, and that's going to double its output. So we turn discharge on, and that current output's gone up pretty much doubled, and now we're now producing the motors, we're producing the construction components. But we do need to remember that we're now draining our power really quite quickly. So these, all of these batteries are now being drained. If you were to leave these running on a server, obviously you'd come back to a ship that had no power left. So do be aware of that, and we're just going to go and we're going to grab motors and construction components that we need to kind of finish off these merge blocks outside. So we come down outside, that's one. Second merge block here, and what these will do is light up green immediately, because we've positioned them so close to each other that they're almost connected already, which is perfect. So we're going to run back upside. We're going to run back upstairs and do the last bit, and this is kind of the dodgy bit. So we need to get into our pilot seat. What I really recommend is you make a flight group. So find your gyroscope and all of your thrusters. So just select them all, holding control to do so. And we're just going to make a group called flight that we can turn on and off whenever we need to move the ship for whatever reason. So for now, we've got all of our batteries set up to actually be providing power. So we're going to turn on our flight group. And at this point, if we go outside into this camera, you can see our engines are running, but we're still held to the ground by our landing gear. So next step, go to the landing gear. We're going to turn auto lock off to stop it relocking again. And then, and here's the slightly dodgy bit, we're going to unlock the landing gear, so we're floating. So, as you can see, we're now unlocked, we're floating here, we're using our power, so we've got to be really quick with this. And we're just going to slide ever so slightly sideways until those merge blocks line up. So you can see they're kind of pulling each other a bit here, and we're just going to keep going. And there, as soon as we clink into this first-person view, they've merged. So if we go back out into the view, you can see that's now all connected together. And looks like, unfortunately, we've managed to do this in a place where our landing gear are actually on the ground, which is a little bit more tricky, but it doesn't matter for the time being because we are merged into place and we are now a platform, not a ship. So we're attached to the ground. So what we can do now is go into our control panel. We can turn flight back off again because that's fine. We're going to stay here until, and that merge block's going to kind of hold us in position. But we don't want just the merge block to be doing that, so let's go down and fix our landing gear problem first. So what we can do is run down here and we can create a new station underneath these landing gear. So get the new station out and we can go around and actually place it if we get the positioning just right. You want to press B here to turn off that station rotation mode. And find a landing gear, here you go, that's a perfect one, where you can have the station in the ground and underneath the landing gear at the same time. And as soon as I build that, you see that landing gear is now lit up. I can weld this all together. I can even, if I wanted to, put two under here. But in fact, I have a plan for this particular landing gear later down the line. So we're going to use this one here, new station, same deal, just line it up underneath so that it's going to allow that landing gear to actually attach to something. So there we go, that landing gear is going to attach nicely onto there. You don't even need to weld it up, but hey, I will do so just for neatness sake. And what we can now do, we don't need to go up to the flight seat for this, we can just go up, access the cargo container, and lock our landing gear. And if we go down, we can find one of these landing gear unlocked. There you go. So this one's now locked. We know we're safe. And because we know we're safe and we're all locked into position, so you can see that one down there locked on, we can now remove the merge blocks again. And all this is going to do... Oops. So after all that confidence, it seems like the block was not sufficiently buried into the ground to actually count as being attached to the ground. So obviously fell over as soon as we removed that merge block. So if you're doing this, make sure it's a little bit deeper down than mine was. However, it doesn't really matter. What we can do now is just get rid of this block. The ship's going to fall down onto its feet, obviously, but those feet are nice and resilient. So this thing's now separated back off again. It's now a ship once more, and we can run inside and find that landing gear and lock them again. So these should now all be locked. You'll see they're all locked straight to the floor, and we are all sorted and back to being free from being a temporary ship. This is never now going to get removed from us. We're all safe. So the final thing we're going to do today is about sustainability of this craft. Basically, we've got our little rover out there. It's hard to recharge it. The solar panels take ages, and it's hard to unload it. It's hard work. So let's build something to do something about that. And what we're going to do is just remove this window, this block, and that block there. What this is going to do is get us access to the back port of this conveyor here. So we're up on the second floor, it's that back window of the craft, and from here we're going to start building out a little network to sort of kind of extend over the edge. So for the purposes of this, we're going to want these conveyor tubes, we're going to want a connector, which we've already got down here, we're going to want, believe it or not, a piston, and we're going to want the corner conveyor tube, so this one. So let's start building. We can, basically what we're trying to do is extend things over the edge. Now, a trick for building this, if we come up to the edge here, you'll see there's sort of a bit that sticks out down there with the landing foot on it. So we're going to build up a platform from that for us to work off of. So if you do this right, you can get a platform just like that, and then we can walk out over the edge here. Makes it a lot easier to do all of this building. And we can stick on the curved bit, and hopefully we've got the bits to weld these as we go. Okay, a few bits missing from that. Let's go down small steel tubes and construction components, and it could be that this is a point again where we need to start queuing up more stuff to be built, because again here, okay, let's refill the assembler, get our construction components out, and yeah, it looks like these two large steel tubes are probably going to be our next problem, and we're out of motors again. So let's go into here, production, let's queue up 20 large steel tubes and another 20 motors, just so they can be going while we're doing all of this. We've got the bits we need, so we can go back upstairs and continue welding. So next part of this is we need to add a piston, but this can be a little bit tricky because there's no real way of getting at the bit we need to do so. So especially when it comes to welding, the easiest way I've found to go about doing this is actually to build this frame like this and then grind it away from underneath you as you need to get at stuff. So you can see here we can now really easily get at the bottom of this, put our piston on as we want it, so piston like that with the head downwards. Here again we can be in a position to weld away, and oh look, there's those large steel tubes we needed. And at the same time we can also, if need be, cut away stuff underneath us. So in this case we want to get at that piston head, which is a bit of a pain in the backside to get at. So what we can do is remove these bits here, fall onto like this foot part, and then place a block there. And that will enable us to get at that piston head and weld this thing up. So what I'm going to do now is actually cut back to the point where this is all welded up, and we'll do the last little bits of it. So we're now at this point here where I've welded up the remainder of that piston, and I've also grinded away the landing gear that was sticking out the side here and the bit that it was attached to. So we've now got this side all completely clear. The final thing we need to add on, and this is going to be a bit of a pain to weld, is we need to put a connector on the end of that piston. Now, in order to weld this up, the easiest thing to do is actually to go inside and drop the piston level down so that you can get at it much more easily. But before you do that, you need to come up and be aware that if you drop it the whole way down, it's going to hit the ground. So you need to go into the piston settings, and we're just going to change this maximal distance to something like 2 meters. And it's going to stop it from extending the whole way. And now when we go back round outside, you'll see that this is going to come down to a point where we can weld it, but not the whole way down to the ground. And this is also what we're going to use to actually connect it up with our ship. So we can weld up this connector on the bottom, and then there's only one final adjustment we need to make for this whole system to work like we want it to, and that's obviously it needs a connector to attach to on the other end. So on our rover buggy here, we're going to do the old double jump up onto the solar panels, and then, like I mentioned in the previous episode, the connector sits nicely on top of this cargo container. So we can go stick that there, weld the thing up, and we're pretty much sorted. Now, that one over there is probably a bit low for the time being, but what we can do is go and remote control our vehicle here. Let's move it round into a position so we know, kind of how tall it is and how low we need to get this connector down to hook things up. So let's have a look. At the moment, looks like we're a bit too low down, but not by that much. Let's put the brake on. Yeah, it's a little bit too low, and what we can actually do to raise this thing up and make things easier for ourselves is access the connector itself. So we can go in here, we're going to find the piston, we know it's on 2 meters and that's a bit low, so let's reverse it, and then we can set this maximal distance to maybe 1.5. We reverse this back down again, and this should be about the right sort of height. That looks pretty good. So the final part of the procedure for this bit is we need to hook our buggy up. So we're just going to get into this thing, give ourselves a slightly better viewpoint to do this, and when we go underneath there, the connector is going to pull us around quite a bit. So I find it helps quite early on to go in, get your connector, drag it out onto your bar, and have both switch lock, but also turn on and off. Now, as we go in here, you'll see that the connector, which hopefully I've judged the height right on, is that going to be good? Yeah, that's going to be pretty much perfect. So this connector is actually going to light up and physically pull us into position. Because they've got that sort of connection force, and we can configure this, it's going to pull us around until we're at just the right spot. So as we get in, you're going to see they're going to light up there, and it's going to actually pull us into position, which is fine for when we're getting into this spot, but not so helpful when we're trying to get out. So now we're here, we can easily press 7. We're now all locked into place. This vehicle is going to stay where it is, and more importantly, we can transfer stuff between cargo as we wish. Not that one, in fact, because that's the one that's hanging off the edge, but as you can see, everything's in here. This thing is now, with batteries, the white ones are the ones on the ship you're on, and these orange ones are on the ship you're attached to. That's how the coloration for grids works. But you can see with these, we can now go in here, and if we wanted to, we can whack them on recharge, and these are going to recharge in 11 minutes to get those fully up and running. But say we want to pull out of here now, so we'd go in here, turn the batteries off charge. If we were to try and unlock and just move, in fact the connection force is low enough, but it pulls us around a bit as we try and mess around. So you can see this force as we get near is going to center us automatically, which is kind of helpful. And you can adjust that force's strength and the connector itself. So we can go down here and you see the strength. You can make it stronger if you want. But if you want to get out of there, obviously the easiest way to do so is just to hit 8. That turns your connector off and completely nullifies that effect. So what we're going to do is we're just going to leave this thing hooked up at the back where it's not going to move around, not going to cause us any problems. Just line things up, be ready for our next journey, and when it's in about right place, hit 7. That's going to lock everything in position, and we can jump out and leave that vehicle there to charge or do whatever we want with it. The last thing we need to worry about is our power, because we have our 3 solar panels on the top, but they're not really enough to keep things running. So the final thing we're going to change is we're going to run up in here and we're going to grab the remainder of our solar panels. We've got quite a few of those. We won't need all of these. So I think it's 60 solar panels per, 64 perhaps per solar panel. So yeah, we're going to get those and we're going to come out onto the wings. And the best place I've found to stick these solar panels is actually kind of hanging off the sides of the ship like this. So it's up to you whether you have them right on the edge of the ship or flip them around like that, but one up that side, and obviously we can walk out onto the engine on the other side as well. And this is just going to give us another 2 solar panels worth of recharge power during the day. These can be a bit of a pain to get at though, so if you need to get at these to weld them, just whacking a block down there and then removing it again is all you really need to do. And as you can see, I'm not going to bother welding them up for the end of this video, you get the idea, but construction components, we've got all the things we need to build these up, and that's going to give us a nice amount of extra power going into our system so our batteries don't completely deplete. Because as you can see, doing all this production, etc., has had a noticeable impact on them. So we come around here again, need that block to help you build it, and you can come up here, and again, all we're missing from this one is construction components. So there you go guys, everything's kind of set up with a bit more power in here, things running a bit more smoothly for us. The last thing we're going to do is just make sure none of our batteries are set to discharge, because obviously that doubles the amount of power that they put out. It's not necessary, so let's just make sure that they're all turned off discharge. And if we go out the front here, you can see I've now finished off those solar panels, and we're looking pretty set for next episode. We got plenty of solar recharging, our little lander's now hooked up and capable of recharging itself, as well as capable of unloading and loading really quickly, and we're just generally a bit more sustainable. We're not about to lose our lander or any mess like that. And the next episode, we're going to start looking at how to scale everything up and get our mining operations to be a little bit more smooth, but more importantly, get a lot more ore. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please hit like, please hit subscribe. It does really help me in the channel out. And if you didn't like it, let me know down in the comments how I can improve. So thanks a lot, guys. I will see you next time.